readers and writers, painters and seekers, in tiaras or trousers, non-conformers and non-believers, gender X or gender equals. Welcome to the launch of The Storms Issue 2. My name is Damien B. Donnelly, and I have the enormous pleasure of being the editor-in-chief of this journal. Last year, for the launch of our inaugural issue, we had it thanks to the Office of Public Works and my job as a tour guide at the Casino in Marino, which is Ireland and Europe's most notable neoclassical building. Today, we are in a 13th century castle in Swords, thanks to the Fingal County Council. If anybody has a private island and they would like to give me a loan of that for issue 3, that would be fantastic, because the bar seems to be rising very quickly. Today we have 18 of our 78 contributors who'll share their poetry and prose, and that includes my fantastic, fabulous sub-editor, Eileen Dupuer. This is the second time that Eileen and I have had a public professional outing together. The first was for the launch of our conversational poetry pamphlet In the Jitterbrits of Neon, which was published last year by the Hedgehog Poetry Press. So I think about this time we had sort of figured out what our strengths and weaknesses were, and I think we managed to pull together, with thanks to everyone who contributed, a really fantastic issue, despite perhaps the obvious eye strain. As I said, we gathered together 78 contributors from all around the globe, and they took us on a journey, and that journey started with our featured visual artist, Jane Rainey from Belfast. Jane's work, which you will see on the cover of the journal, they appear to erupt like maps, lava flows of meanders through miles and memory, cloud and confusion, mystery and the mountain. This time we had no theme, but as we began to read through the submissions, certain themes began to unfold naturally, and the most prominent of those was about movement. The pandemic has ended, and here we are, back out on the road, en route to castles, in cars, in trains, taking flight, taking stock of what we missed and noting what we left behind. In this new landscape, unsettled by our returning footsteps. These contributions contemplate not only our own social behaviour, but also the environment, the ecology, examining the fallow fields that for a time became our entire worlds, and also the furry creatures who perhaps were a little happier without us for a while. Along the way, we have moments of comfort and connection. Some of these new and some of these memories still to fade, but what also appeared was a return to fairy tales, to myth and magic. Perhaps it was the mystery that we needed in order to step back out into the world, having been locked down for so long. On a return to the root, we have noted that it was not only humanity that was shaken, but also our entire planet. And yet, somehow, we've managed to retain a little bit of light, as you will hear later from our featured prose writer, Rona Green, who writes, "Something shines as something dims, and hope echoes inside the song of grace." So our first contributor is an eye doctor who lives in County Galway, who last year won the Poems for Patients competition as part of the Curt Art Festival in Galway. She was one of 3 featured poets in last November's Over the Edge open reading. Please welcome to Swords Castle, Sasha Hutchinson.
Nature leaves Earth, each species, one by one. Far away, specks of ships grow as they approach. Follow me, heel off your shoes, ball up your socks, walk slowly over smooth, round stones. Let this moment hold memory.
Now, next up, we have a student of immersive software engineering at the University of Limerick. She has been passionate about poetry and spoken word since she was 11, and she draws on personal experiences and thoughts in her work, in the hope of making her poems relatable and interesting. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Emily Royce.
This is the first time I've ever been published, so it was really special. Yeah. I am afraid of driving a car by myself. I am afraid of seeing the picture on my license and my reflection in the mirror, and seeing the slowly changing eyes look away, avoiding mine. I'm afraid of the power I will feel as my fingertips trace the edges of the key, and as I hear my breath mix with the soft sounds of the engine. I'm afraid of being seen by a stranger at the traffic lights who will look me in the eyes and think about me for a moment.
It's one of the joys about being able to put together a journal, especially when all the submissions are read blind. So we don't know who these people are. There's no sort of request for where you've been published before. So we get this fantastic mixture of prize-winning poets and poets who are being published for the first time. So very excited about our next guest that I get to welcome up to the stage, because she is not only my dear friend, but my trusted sub-editor here on Issue 2. Her poems have appeared in the Stony Thursday book, Banshee, The Wax Lemon, Abridged, and Dateless Local Wonders Anthology. And her pamphlet in the Jitterfritz of Neon, co-written by myself, was published last year by the Hedgehog Poetry Press. So it is an honour to have her by my side while we launch this new issue. This is Eileen de Poer.
The first poem I have to read is one, I was trying to write a poem about my relationship with my brother Neil for a long time, and I'm hoping that this one might capture some of it. So, Turn-taking for beginners. It was Pacelli's biscuit tin I most looked forward to. She kept it stocked with malted milks, pink wafers, custard creams, the biscuit tin and her net curtains, which I was allowed to hide behind, and that contained dried blue bottles hooked to the voile like applique jewels. Her exotic name was in homage to Pius XII, my mother explained. My brother struggled with sibilance, so Pacelli focused our hour on snakes sleeping under bushes and shoe shops selling sandals with straps. My red brogues peeped beneath the curtains like popped-out tongues, they and the biscuits distracting my brother from sailboats at the seashore. And this is one for my son, Donna. In times of lesser light. And because you were old enough to choose, I brought you to the hardware shop, into the illuminated cave at the far back reaches, where light fittings dripped like stalactites from the dropped ceiling, and succulent wall lights reached upwards from every plane of the mock room walls. Longer in diameter than you in height, a moon in a galaxy of suns. The CEO of the Everyman Theatre, and his work has appeared in Poetry Ireland Review, the RTE Poem of the Day, The Moth, Skylight 47, and highly commended in the 2019 Patrick Kavanagh Poetry Award. Please enjoy the poetry of Sean Kelly.
I'm at the mercy of this sunset, sitting at open patio doors while my boys play on the trampoline, tossing a stuffed monkey back and forth between them. Being a father, I'm supposed to conduct the breezes, be midwife to rains of adoration. Well, I'm at the stage where hooded figures lunge at me in dreams. Better they take what lessons they can from, say, Snow White, drying her hair on the beach, true story, looking up to see the Queen standing on battlements, left arm in the air, while leaves fell from trees and the grey-hearted sea lay back in sleep.
Is a poet who was born in a small town in Australia, but now lives here in Dublin. His poetry has been published in many places, including The Honest Ulsterman, Sheafers, Abridged, and Orbis. I am very delighted to welcome S.C. Flynn.
This gasworks chimney is a survivor, the last standing stone of its circle. The others have eroded over time, but they once used to cover this landscape. That must have been a world of primary shades, lacking the luxury of colour. A collage clipped from old newspapers, when those pipes of the gigantic organ blasted out their gritty music.
Our next guest today travelled the furthest to join us all the way from the UK. Her work has appeared in places like Atrium, Impossible Archetype, Lighthouse, Magma, Pop Shop. She has been commissioned by the Manchester Literature Festival, Manchester Pride and Islington Mill 21. This is Elizabeth Gibson.
I think the corpse is of a bigger animal, and I try to work out which, in that split second before seeing and knowing. It's like how the moments before fainting or after dreaming last much longer inside us than they do outside, and are looser as to what can exist.
Our next guest started writing poetry at the beginning of lockdown to prompts by Poetry Ireland's poet-in-residence at the time, Catherine Ann Cullen. Maura is also a musician and an experimental video and abstract animation artist, exploring moving images with a poetic and musical expression in what she calls visual music. So, Maura MacDonald.
Your laugh like scatterings of glitter from glass. Your gaze of intense light falls upon his face. You take your pose. He grasps your arm and off your breaths. The tango across the room, solid stomping steps, sharp turns, long runs to the corners and back. The crowd stand back in applause. Spinning with attention, the spotlight pauses. As quickly as you arrive, you gently flutter to the side. Admirers in pursuit, like a star sparkle before you are gone.
She's a writer and teacher based in Cork. She's recently completed an MA in creative writing in the University of Limerick. Her work has featured in the Own Stone, on shorterstories.ie and on the Jealous Wall podcast for Dublin Digital Radio. And here she is with her short story, Incandescent Obsolescence, Maeve Keane.
So, did the pandemic affect you much? Well, he said, taking a slug of his pint, I mend harmonicas for a living. He pulled the cream from his moustache with his lower lip, and a sigh that could equally have been satisfaction or despair. Ah, busy enough the whole time, so, I said, idiotically. He looked at me, weighing me up, a half smile. Busy enough for me anyway, he admitted. Most people come west for the sea. I had come for the sky. We met one evening at the pub. He showed me his home the next day. My own cottage was empty, lonely, but not lonely like the lighthouse. Neil had every nook stuffed full to the brim with clothes, books, mugs, newspapers, useful things, useless things. And yet there were gaps you couldn't ignore. We went outside, smoking cigarettes at the edge of the world. He played his own harmonica for me then, notes shining, stretching, longing. The sound of it almost touching something long gone or far into the future, out of date and out of time. Exquisite, God-forsaken.
Her debut poetry collection in the Museum of Misremembered Things was published by Dara Press in 2020, and the title poem won the An Post Irish Book Awards Irish Poem of the Year in that year. In 2018, she won the Seamus Heaney Award for New Writing and the Red Line Festival Award. Please welcome Linda McKenna.
My poem in the journal is called At the Frost Fair, and it's inspired by the story of the last great frost fair on the Thames in 1814. It's part of a sequence of poems that I'm writing about a woman who was lived around that time. At the Frost Fair. I print myself on ice, bruised blue and purple with spilled ink. Dexterous with needles, I sew cold type into a false promise of family. The creak of the press masks the river's threatening whispers, until the thaw, arriving sooner than predicted, swallows paper and powder, splits verse and song, harmless scandal, comic touches, sly love poems.
We are now heading to Wales for our next guest, who originally emigrated from Cardiff in 1996. He is a lifelong lover of reading poetry and recently returned to the art of writing poetry. He lives here in Dublin with his wife Emer and their dog Juno. This is Simon Rees.
Stretch the fitted bottom sheet, negotiate the creases out, Pillows 1, 2, 3, 4. Duvet cover inside out, her hands puppet the extremities. She grabs two corners and shakes, voila! We nestle the other corners and snap it into shape. Now the ritual race to close the buttons, first to the middle. She cheats and I let her.
Next up, our guest is from Tramore in County Waterford. Her publications include Poetry Ireland Review, the Irish Times, the Irish Independent. In 2021, she was shortlisted for the Julian Lennon Prize for Poetry. Her poem Wedding Dress won the Listowel Writers' Week Poem of the Year at the Irish Book Awards 2022. This is Martina Dalton.
It's lovely to be here. The journal is extraordinary. And I think even more importantly, I think the people you've gathered and whatever you're doing, there's a magic about it. And I love that there are people reading poems, having their first poems published. I think that's huge and great. Hats off to you. How safe I felt in its womb, beneath the joist's ribs. Motes drifting up between the boards like smoke. The air so thin and light. Your mother's sewing machine whirring below us, stitching our identical skirts. Two hands mirroring each other's brush strokes, delicate as the dreams we painted for ourselves.
Next up, we have a prose writer who writes about troubles, fiction, and the odd piece of time travel. Stories have appeared in the Wax Lemon, Zunder magazine, The Lonely Crowd. You can find her as part of the Northern Soul Roadshow this year with the Irish Writer Centre Online and the Arts Council for Northern Ireland. Please welcome Fiona O'Rourke.
At the checkpoint, the soldiers eye the minibus driver. What are they thinking? What's a priest doing with a pile of school kids? Your teacher has organised Gaeltacht scholarships because no one can afford the college fees. The soldiers peer in the side windows like it's feeding time at a zoo. For a change, they don't say, "All right, darling, you 16 yet?" 1 week later, a tall lad from Ballymun monopolises the dashboard radio, skims channels till they shriek like needles when ripped off vinyl. At your first Gaeltacht the previous year, it was the end of primary school. Now it's the end of the first year of secondary school, the end of being the youngest again. This year you don't stay in the Ballantyne's front room when custard creams are presented on doilies for his nighttime visits. You go up to the bedroom shared with 3 girls and smoke out the window while singing about heartbreak and substitutes. Changing substitute to prostitute, you girls cackle wildly. One dubbed girl remains downstairs and tells you you're very rude for not staying to talk to the priest who made the visit especially to see the Nordies. He has not dressed yet and sits on the driver's seat with a belly overhang on the waistband of his black trunks. Who wants to go first? Not you. Instinct says this is wrong, in the same way that gyrating beneath a tile to make sure no one can see a stray body part is a necessity. Excitement at the opportunity to ricochet a massive car around a stretch of sand cannot cancel out your absolute belief that your swimming suit at backside should not go anywhere near his bulging swimming trunks. He lets each bikini-clad girl sit in his knee, then pushes them forward with his torso closer to the steering column to let them drive, his arms circling their tiny bodies, his hands on theirs gripping the wheel. There is a photograph in your parents' house, taken in the first summer at the Gaeltacht. You standing at a gap in a hedge, arm around a donkey's neck. You could be in a tourist postcard, hair ragged after drying in the sun and wind. You have clothes on, a red tank top and brown skirt, knee-length socks and Moses sandals. After being for a swim, after being rubbish at camogie, after not driving the priest's car. The priest took that photo on one of his many trips with children to the sea.
Now we have another contributor from Northern Ireland, this time from Bangor, and with a poem on page 73 in the journal. His poetry has appeared in a number of journals, including Poetry Northern Ireland, Lagan Online, the Bangor Literary Journal. He's performed his poetry on local television and placed first in the Aspects Festival Poetry Slam 2022. Please welcome Gifford Savage.
Rekindling. He would tread softly, trying not to wake us, but I would hear him boil the kettle to wash and shave. The sound of water splashing as he dipped and swished the razor in the basin. I would listen for him raking the ashes, bringing the banked up embers back to life. The crunch of shovel on coal, heaping fresh fuel on fire before he set the guard in place.
Our next poet is also a fiction writer and an academic based in Dublin. Their poetry has recently been published by Poetry Ireland and Ireland House. This is Rachel Handley.
It's not a place I need to go to, but a feeling, a sleeping peace, a soft cooling of the heart. Your hair flops forward like a spare limb as you tell me about the cold sorriness of trees, about the laughing shout of birds. I wonder if you'd always mistaken these things for your own living freedom.
The next reader really doesn't need any introduction because it's going to be Damien, but just before he does deserve an introduction, I will read his bio, but just on a personal note, I suppose just wanted to acknowledge the huge efforts that Damien went to produce this beautiful journal, and he really, although he does invite sub-editors along, it really is something that he takes the huge lead on, and it's his talent and exuberance and enthusiasm and skill, said talent, but anyway, skill as well, that brings it all off. So thanks very much, Damien. Just one other thing to say about working with Damien, and I think all of us will feel this about him, it's really quite lovely to meet, when you're writing poetry, people for whom it absolutely is not a competition. Damien doesn't view poetry or writing short stories or anything he does as a competition. He sees it as a community endeavour, and he sees it as a communication. And I think that the fact we're all here today with you, Damien, is a sign that your rising tide is raising all our boats, and we really are grateful for the opportunities that your various platforms are providing. So thank you for that.
And so all the contributions were read blind, and I did the same thing. So I put a number on my story and I sent it to Eileen with everybody else's, and I thought, well, if she comes back and she rejects it, then it doesn't get in the journal. Thankfully she came back and it was accepted, and then I told her that it was mine. She was a little red at this point and a little bit annoyed that I had tricked her, but I thought, fair is fair, it only deserves to get in there if somebody really wants to hear it. So I laughed when you said, come catch the coconuts on the gorse, when spring was only starting and the clouds not yet released their light. Back when we were children in Spain for 2 weeks, growing up and out, under white sand and orange sun, or was it white sun and orange sand? They smashed a coconut shell on the counter of a bar, and ever since then, I've never let go of that scent. The trees you planted once, when father was but a word that could wrap us up in a hold of Marlborough scent, have returned. The hawthorn briar, now a branch of white blossom, a fragrance faint but familiar, with orbiting orange spots like that white sun and the orange sand. Crossing just above the solid road and below the as yet unclear sky, now missing a single grey-tipped bird, are telephone wires that connect things. Fields, poles, sound, voice, people answering each other's messages. I write without needing a stamp. I know you will never reply. Michael sprayed the far field with silage last Sunday, while I turned that single room back into a study, holding up tiny things, never to be worn in boxes, and placing them next to yours in the attic. There are enough things in there now to drown in. I do not know how you managed to get out. I'm still here. still smelling the white coconut on the yellow gorse. A part of me still burning under an orange sun, here on the green grass where grey things have found their final days. I feel very far from the sounds we left behind in Spain, and those shells, one of which holds an echo of our laughter. I imagine it as bright as the moon in the darkness, the last sparks of our youth that now only I can remember. Thank you very much. Our third last guest today is a poet and dramatist from Dublin who has written for the stage and screen, but over the last 4 years has become known for her poetry and her spoken word. She was a winner at the Curt International Festival in 2018 and an All-Ireland Poetry Slam finalist in 2019. Her writing has been published in print and online, and she is currently working on her first poetry pamphlet called Escape. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sheila Ryder.
Hi everyone, and thank you to Eileen and Damien as well. It's my first time in a kind of a poetry journal, so I'm getting a real buzz about it, just even reading out of it. So, a green piece of sea glass is a long time at sea, breaking the waves, tasting its salty hooves and vitality. It can never go back to sharp edges or the full glass bottle it left behind. Now curved and mellow, it is a frosted treasure, forever changing, but always part of home. Thank you.
We are down to our penultimate guest now. This is our featured prose writer for issue 2 of The Storms. She is also a Pushcart Prize nominated poet, a writer from Dublin, whose work has appeared in several Black Bough poetry anthologies. She was shortlisted for the Di Fry Mystical Award, and her poem in Afterfeather gave the edition its name, making her one of the anthology's featured writers. She has also featured in Sarah Connor's Advent Poems 2021 and in Anik Yeram's annual Advent project, and has appeared very graciously many times on Into the Storms Poetry Podcast. She is the true light of the literary community. I'm delighted to present to you Rona Green.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like a dream to be here, to meet Damien and Eileen, and to be in the journal and to see faces that feel like family, like Gaynor there. It's just wonderful, and like all of you who have already said and acknowledged the beautiful, beautiful space that Damien creates for us, I just also want to say thank you so much for just this wonderful place you have made for gathering online and now at long last to be here in person with you all. And so I'm thrilled to be here to tell you my gilt-edged secrets. So, it is morning, broken by the glint of sun's first kiss. Tenderlings arise, leave the riverbed. Days muster in seeds of hope. Blossoms of joy openly turn toward the light. Beauty blooms. Somewhere else, someone, something whispers, Amelia, Welia, Walia. It was evening, as I recall, that time when everything is a mere shadow of itself. That time when I first hear the sound of the Welia, Welia, Walia, and become aware of something other. The sun is dying. Up swooped starlings surge, blade-shaped shimmer glyphs spilling into empty skies, filling the creep of night's evening shade in glinting tones. gilt-edged secrets never to be told. Beyond the moon, somewhere black, the periphery, ice cold. Tenderlings tumble and leap like leaves in a gust of wind. They are yet to realise they don't know what everyone knows. And so they tumble, unknowingly, dreaming their lives away. They tumble into the dark, hurtling pearls and curses, where shadows breathe black over arching blue, where daylight's fading pulses, tethered to thinly veiled threats, and the hollow promise of tomorrow's snarls, hopeless. Sails to the wind, they drift back down to the river, where they'll rest between this time and another in the circle of light. They will break again. They will blossom again. They will grow. Now they know what everyone knows. And whichever way the wind blows, leap, tenderlings, leap.
So our final guest is an author from Cork. He is a mental health advocate and he runs the award-winning mental health blog Thoughts Too Big. He has 2 collections of short stories published by Riversong Books, as well as work appearing in several literary magazines, including The Ogham Stone, Bearbua and The Madrigal One. And his collection of essays on mental health is called The Lonely Boy, and it was published by Book Hub Publishing. This is Dara Fleming.
Thanks for having me, guys. If I was going to describe Damien and Eat the Storms in one word, I think it's encouraging. And I think, for me, encouragement has always been really important because it's free to give, but it's often withheld. So it's really nice to have such an encouraging community. So I'm going to read a few poems. The first one I'll read is from The Storms. When I was 17, my best friend took his own life, and I've written about him for a long time, but only in the last year or so I've been able to share it with people. And each time it's been public, I've had work published about him recently a few times, and I always try to make the effort to come to the launches to read about him because it's important to me. So I just want to thank you for listening to this one especially. So this is called I Wish. I wish I could tell you that I won a £5 on a scratch card last Tuesday, and about how long it took me to get out of Dublin on Friday night. I wish I could complain to you about how expensive hotels are these days, or tell you about how hungover I am, and how I'm never drinking again. I wish I could meet your family and be there at your wedding. I wish I could have been the world's best uncle to children who have your lad. I wish 1,000 things. I wish things could have been different. I wish you could have told me of the pain. But above all else, I just wish you could be here.
Last year at our inaugural issue launch, we were joined by one of our inaugural issue stars, Kevin Higgins. And Kevin passed away last month, so I would just like to pay tribute to him, thank him for joining us, and thank him to everything he did for the poetry and the prose and the writing community here in Ireland. He has a large legacy and he will definitely be missed. Thank you all so much for coming here today. Thank you once again to Sarah Bannon and Audrey Keane from the Arts Council in Ireland, and thank you to Denise Reddy and to Rory O'Brien from the Fingal Arts. The issue of the journal is available online at www.eatthestorms.com, and also thank you to the bookstores, the independent bookstores around Ireland who are stocking issue 1 and issue 2, and they include Books Upstairs here in Dublin, the Winding Stair Bookcase also in Dublin, Charlie Burns in County Galway, the Dingle Bookstore in County Kerry, Books at One in Lewisburg in County Mayo, and also the Secret Bookshelf in Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland. Just before I go, I would like to give, as Eileen already did, a shout out to my inaugural issue superstar, sub-editor Gaynor Kane, who is here today, Jonathan Belfast. And of course, once more, if you would give it up for the fantastic stylings and the fantastic sublime editing of Eileen de Peur, my sub-editor. And of course, finally and most importantly, thank you to each and every one of you, the contributors who have made this possible, who have made the Poetry Podcast possible. I was away for 23 years, so when I came back to Ireland, having worked in the fashion industry for a long time, it wasn't possible to get a job because the job doesn't exist here, so I had to do something else, and I thought I'll do poetry. My poetry pamphlet was coming out, and then there was a lockdown, nobody was going to know anything about it, so I thought, shit, what am I going to do? Sorry. And we're in chapel. And then I thought, well, I'll make a podcast. And so I made a podcast called Eat the Storms, because that was the name of my chapbook. And it was just me reading on the first episode. And I thought, oh, God, what am I going to do next? It can't be just me reading. So I invited people to take part. Gaynor Kane was one of the first ones, followed by Karen Mooney and many others, and Eileen de Peur. And that turned into 6 series, 475 guests around the world, and now issue 2 of The Storms. And it's all down to the community that you've all helped create. So thank you all so much. I'm, as you can see, very moved and very touched. On we go, out into the big wide expanse of the unknown, going forward until we can't go any further. If you have already seen issue 2, you will know that it begins and ends the same way, with 2 photographic collages from Jeffrey Yamaguchi, an American artist. Their last collage is of a person standing on a highway on a closed road. Maybe space is the new route. We are ravenous. We won't give up, regardless of the closures, the pandemics, the losses. We move on, we look up, and then we fly. And that's thank you so much, and please, as I have to say, stay bloody poetic!